Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Dream On, a series in which we talk about all things Dreamcast. Today we'll be taking a close look at Skies of Arcadia, a classic RPG for the system. Roll the title screen. Skies of Arcadia is a classic role-playing video game developed by Overworks for the Dreamcast and published by Sega in the year 2000. Players control Vyse, a young air pirate and his friends as they attempt to stop the Valuan Empire from reviving ancient weapons with the potential to destroy the world. Skies of Arcadia uses traditional Japanese role-playing game mechanics such as turn-based and experience point-based character progression, but puts greater focus on exploration with the player flying an airship in 3D space. The development team included staff who contributed to Panzer Dragoon Saga, Phantasy Star, Sonic the Hedgehog and Sakura Wars games. Skies of Arcadia was one of the best reviewed Dreamcast games, but underperformed commercially. After Sega's exit from the hardware industry, it was ported to the Nintendo Gamecube as Skies of Arcadia Legends in the year 2002. The gameplay. The game plays as a traditional Japanese role-playing video game with an emphasis on world exploration. Gameplay is similar to early Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest games, centred around the prospect of the player directing a character to engage enemies in turn-based battles to earn money and experience points to make the character stronger, and in effect, be able to take on stronger enemies. Traversing the game's overworld is done through flying large airships in 3D space, travelling between the fictional game world of 6 regions and searching all the space in between for secrets and discoveries, present hidden locations that give the player added benefits for progressing through the game. The game's world map starts out blank, and it's up to the player to chart and map through exploration alone. The player may also recruit characters they encounter in exploration, allowing them to place on the ship or base staff, adding extra benefits to exploration or battles. When docked on land masses or warships, exploration occurs on foot. There, gameplay alternates between exploring cities and progressing through the game's dungeon. Cities are visited to buy equipment to make characters stronger and interact with non-playable characters to progress the story. The dungeons exist in the format of a maze, with the player navigating the characters through it to obtain beneficial items in treasure chests while taking on enemies in random battles. Getting through the end of a maze generally culminates in a last boss battle to be won prior to exiting the maze. The setting. The game takes place in the fictional skies referred to as Arcadia, where 6 civilizations coexist on floating continents orbited by 6 moons of different colours. Thousands of years prior to the present time of the game, the civilizations, one of which existed on each moon, developed technology to the point where they created the Gigas, or Geigers, a colossal living weapon of mass destruction, controlled by a moon crystal. Using the Geigers, the civilization warred with one another, threatening the extinction of humanity. The creation of the game. Development on the original Dreamcast version began in 1999, under the codename Project Errors. The game's title was then changed to Eternal Arcadia in 2000, which was the game's final name as it released in Japan. The internal Sega development team, Overworks, consisted of development staff from Team Andromeda, from the Phantasy Star development teams. The game's producer, Reiko Kodama, in addition to working on Phantasy Star 1, 2 and 4, had also worked on the first 2 Sonic the Hedgehog games for Sega Genesis. While scenario writer, Shantaro Kantaka, had written the stories for the first 2 Sakura Wars games. Highly popular Japan-only RPG releases. The game's soundtrack was compromised by Yutaka Minobe and Tatsuki Maeda, the latter of which had composed music for Sonic and Knuckles. Anticipation and expectations were immediately set high between the team's pedigree, especially considering the Team Andromeda's prior game, Panzer Dragoon Saga, had received critical acclaim, and the relative lack of high-quality RPGs on the Dreamcast. Despite the pressure placed on the team, development generally went smoothly, something attributed to the increased horsepower and easier to develop nature of the Dreamcast in comparison to the Sega Saturn. The team was made up of a staff of around 20 people. The team made conscious decisions to make entering individual buildings in town seamless, without additional loading, and to use an expressive anime art style to more clearly show facial expressions and emotion of characters, both of which they felt had been lacking from recent popular RPGs, such as Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII. Similarly, While the aforementioned games were focused on dark themes and complicated gameplay systems, Overworks strove to keep the game bright and cheerful, with simple gameplay mechanics that focused on exploring a large game world. The game had to be released across 2 of Sega's proprietary GD-ROM discs to accommodate its relatively large size for the time. The game's Japanese release date was initially for September the 14th in the year 2000, but was later delayed back to October the 5th 2000, in order for the team to create a paid trial version demo for the concurrent release. The release was heavily promoted in the region, featuring multiple television commercials and posters in public places like subways. During launch month and spanning 8 months total, the game also received an official manga in every issue of Magazine Z, supervised by the game development team themselves. A separate release of the game's soundtrack released on CD as a double album, and that was released on the same day. The reception of the game. The original Dreamcast release of Skies of Arcadia received critical acclaim throughout game reviewers. At Metacritic, which assigns a normalised rating out of 100 to reviews from mainstream critics, the game has an average score of 93 out of 100, which indicates universal acclaim based on 21 reviews. Game rankings, pulling from a higher percentage of reviews, tracked it slightly lower at 90% out of 40 reviews. IGN praised it for being one of the most solid games visually on the Dreamcast, and concluded that there's so much to explore, so much character, and a great story that you don't mind being retold again. GameSpot gave the game a 9.2 as well, praising the visuals, stating that they were some of the most painstakingly detailed they'd ever seen in a role-playing game. As a whole, GameSpot concluded that the game lives up to the high expectations. Game Informer listed it as one of the top 10 Dreamcast games. Despite the generally positive reviews, many critics did not criticise that it was sometimes difficult to explore the game's open world due to the high rate of random encounter battles frequently disrupting the progress. Despite this, in 2017 retrospective from Metacritic, on the highest rated exclusive games at the time of release per platform, Skies of Arcadia placed 3rd for the Dreamcast, behind Soul Calibur and Jet Set Radio. In the May 2017 issue of Game Informer magazine, they listed Skies of Arcadia as the 55th best RPG of all time. Now let's talk about the aborted entries of the series. In addition to the cancelled PlayStation 2 and PC releases of the game, a sequel to the game was considered by Sega in the early 2000s, but did not begin full production. The development team had shown interest in creating a sequel or a portable iteration for the Game Boy Advance during the development of the Legends version for the Gamecube, but neither materialised. In September 2002, after the completion of Legends, Skies of Arcadia producer Reiko Kodama stated that the team was still interested in creating a sequel, but that work still had not started on it, although it had started. She felt that the Gamecube would have been the most likely platform for its release. In February 2003, Overworks president Noriyoshi Oba announced that the Skies of Arcadia sequel had entered the planning stages. However, in a December 2004 interview, Kodama stated that there had been plans for a sequel. The project was put on hold indefinitely, while many members of the team were pulled into working on Sakura Wars, So Long My Love. Starting in 2010, Sega began a campaign of releasing HD masters of Dreamcast games, digitally, on PlayStation Network and Xbox Live for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 consoles, including games such as Sonic Adventure, Crazy Taxi, Sonic Adventure 2 and Jet Set Radio. Sega brand manager Ben Harborn stated that Skies of Arcadia HD was a likely next release after Shenmue, as they were the most frequently requested titles for re-release. Sega renewed the Skies of Arcadia trademark later in the year, although a re-release never did materialise. My overall thoughts of the game. Overall, I would say Skies of Arcadia is one of the best Dreamcast RPG experiences money can buy. It appeals to the casual and hardcore RPG gamers alike, and if you have not already got it, I strongly urge you to play it, or at least one of the re-releases. That was Skies of Arcadia in a nutshell. Thanks for watching, and I will see you again real soon.